"Don't drink that," she whispered. "It's not just juice." Raymond Lewis froze, the glass of chilled orange juice inches from his lips. He glanced sideways and saw Caitlin Brooks, 12 years old. Slight, quiet, with eyes that had learned to scan the world, long before she should have needed to. Her voice had barely broken the silence of the breakfast room, but the warning in her tone cut through the morning calm like a siren. He set the glass down slowly. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to keep his voice light, even playful. "Did I grab your juice by mistake?" Caitlin didn't smile. She just stood there, hands tucked behind her back, toes turned slightly inward, wearing the pink hoodie she almost never took off. Her eyes stayed on the glass. "It smells like that stuff they used on me once back at the center when they didn't want us to remember." Just before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And make sure you're subscribed, Bup Storytelling, so you don't miss tomorrow's special video. Now, let's jump back in. Enjoy the story. Raymond felt a chill crawl up his spine despite the warmth in the room. The floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the breakfast nook in golden California light. Outside, the lawn crew trimmed the hedges. Inside, the smell of cinnamon toast and freshly squeezed juice mingled in the air, and yet everything suddenly felt off. He looked towards the kitchen, where Whitney, his fiancée, was humming softly, her heels clicking against the marble as she arranged a tray of fruit. "Whitney made it," he said carefully. Caitlin nodded. "I know." Raymond looked at the juice again. It had beads of condensation rolling slowly down the glass. It looked like every other glass of juice she'd poured him over the last 6 months. But now, thanks to one small voice, it looked like a threat. He gave a slight laugh. More out of habit than humor. "You've got quite the imagination," he said, brushing her hair back behind her ear. She didn't flinch, but she didn't smile either. "I'm just saying," she said softly. "Maybe don't drink it. Not yet." He watched her walk out of the room, her little sneakers squeaking on the tile. The door clicked shut behind her, and Raymond was left with the silence and the juice. He didn't drink it. Instead, he poured it down the sink. That night, he found himself standing at his home office window, looking out at the dark. Whitney had long since gone to bed. The house was quiet, but his mind was louder than ever. Her smile earlier that evening had been just like every other time. Warm, affectionate, effortless, too effortless. Caitlin's words wouldn't leave him. He'd taken in the girl 6 weeks earlier after a chance encounter through one of his tech non-profit outreach programs. She'd flagged an exploit in his company's public-facing firewall. When they traced the IP, they found her sitting in the corner of a group foster home using a second-hand tablet she'd taught herself to repair. Raymond, intrigued by her mind and quietly moved by her situation, brought her home. It had been quiet, not quite fatherhood, not quite mentorship, but something in between. She was observant, too observant sometimes. She asked very little, but noticed everything, and now she was warning him. He leaned over his desk and pulled up his security monitor logs. Everything appeared in order, but maybe that was the problem. It was too orderly. He opened the home network diagnostics next. Unusual signals. He blinked. One of the side devices, something registering near the second-floor hallway, had a signature he didn't recognize. Not one of the standard routers. Not the thermostat or smart fridge. It was something small, active, pulsing, and unregistered. He reached for his phone to call his head, but stopped halfway. He remembered Caitlin's face, the steadiness in her eyes, the way she hadn't pushed, just whispered and waited. For the first time in weeks, Raymond admitted something to himself. Maybe he hadn't been paying enough attention, and maybe someone else had. The next morning, he woke early and walked into the kitchen. Caitlin was already there, sitting on the bar stool, silently stirring oatmeal. She looked up, but said nothing. "Good morning," he said. She nodded. "I didn't drink it," he added more softly. She paused, spoon in midair. "I know." Raymond sat down across from her. "Would you be willing to show me how you knew?" Caitlin's shoulders rose just slightly in surprise. Then slowly, she nodded. Outside, the sun was rising over the hills of Palo Alto. But inside, something far more important was beginning. A shift, not in power, but in trust. And trust, Raymond realized, didn't always come from security systems or encrypted firewalls. Sometimes it came from a child's whisper. Later that morning, while the household moved on as if nothing had changed, Raymond found himself quietly watching Caitlin from the corner of his office. She wasn't doing anything dramatic, just sitting cross-legged on the rug near the bookshelf, sketching something on her old tablet. But her posture, her stillness, the way she subtly glanced around, he saw something he hadn't noticed before. Awareness, the kind you don't develop unless you've been let down too many times. "Do you always notice everything?" he asked. Caitlin didn't look up. "Mostly," she murmured. "It's how I know if I'm safe." Her words landed heavier than he expected. Raymond crossed the room and sat on the leather ottoman a few feet from her. "You said the juice smelled like something from before." She nodded. "The group home. They called it quiet time. Gave us juice that made us sleepy. I learned how to pretend to drink and hide the cups in my hoodie." He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small scrap of folded paper. "I found this under the baseboard in the hallway closet." It looked like it had been tucked behind a photo frame. Caitlin took it carefully. The paper was worn. The ink faded. Symbols like a code or puzzle were arranged in neat rows. She studied it. "It's binary," she said. "Sort of." Raymond blinked. "You can read that?" Caitlin gave a slight shrug. "I've seen stuff like it before. One of the foster dads was into online games with encryption mods. He didn't think I was paying attention." Her fingers moved across her tablet, opening a translation app. "See this part? It's a MAC address. That's a device, not yours." Raymond leaned in. "So, someone hid this behind the frame. Probably dropped it," Caitlin guessed. "Or maybe I forgot it was there." Just then, Michael entered the room. She was tall, elegant, even in her 60 seconds, and moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd kept households running for decades. She looked between them, noting the paper in Ma's hand. "What's this?" "We think it's a device ID," Raymond said. "Not one of mine." Michael raised a brow. "I clean that hallway every Tuesday. Never noticed anything unusual." "That's kind of the point," Caitlin said without looking up. "Whoever did this didn't want anyone to notice." Michael gave her a long assessing look. Then she nodded and turned to Raymond. "I've been meaning to mention something strange. Yesterday morning, I came in early and saw Miss Whitney in the study. She said she couldn't sleep, but she wasn't near the books. She was by your desk." Raymond straightened. "Doing what?" "She said she was looking for that magazine article about your company, the one in Forbes. But I didn't see it. And she looked startled when I walked in. And that detail struck him like a match to dry tinder." He remembered now the magazine was on his nightstand. He never left it in the office. Caitlin slowly stood. "I think she's been watching you." Raymond rubbed his jaw. "You really think she's spying on me?" "For who?" Caitlin tilted her head. "I don't know, but if she's sending your files out, she's not keeping them." Raymond turned toward Michael. "How long have you worked for this family?" 32 years, she said, lifting her chin. "Then you know this house better than anyone." Michael nodded once. "I need you to help me look," he said, "for anything strange, devices that don't belong, anything moved, and I need it quiet." Michael didn't hesitate. "Understood." Caitlin stepped closer. "I can help too." Raymond hesitated, then looked at her tablet, her quick mind, the way she'd seen things he'd missed. "All right," he said. "But no risks. We're careful. Careful's my default," she said softly. That afternoon, the three of them began a quiet sweep of the house. Raymond checked the official network logs. Caitlin scanned for rogue signals. Michael used her long memory of every object in every room to spot anything new or out of place. It was Caitlin who found the first real clue. In the guest room, Whitney's favorite for overnight guests, Caitlin stood by the marble vase Whitney had given Raymond as a birthday gift. It was ornate. Not quite his taste, but he'd kept it because she'd been so enthusiastic about it. "There's something buzzing near here," Caitlin said, holding her tablet close. "It's faint, but it's on." Raymond gently lifted the vase. Inside, nestled beneath decorative stones, was a tiny black dot the size of a watch battery, a recording device. His blood ran cold. Michael said nothing, just crossed herself quietly. He held the device between two fingers. "How the hell did I miss this?" Because you trusted her, Caitlin said. If you've ever been hurt because you trusted the wrong person, give Caitlin a like for her incredible wisdom. And don't forget to comment where you're watching this video from. Who knows? Someone nearby might be watching this story right along with you. Lewis stared at the object. Trust. That word hit differently now. He turned to Caitlin. Do you think there are more? I'd bet on it, she replied. By nightfall, they'd found 3. One behind the painting in his study, one inside the decorative clock in the living room, and one inside his nightstand drawer. All places Whitney had touched in the last month. Raymond sat back on the edge of his bed, his fingers steepled under his chin. She knew when I'd be gone. She always showed up with coffee right when I was stressed. She was always offering to help organize my files. She's good, Michael said softly. Too good, Caitlin added. Raymond finally spoke. We need proof. Hard proof enough to hold up in court if needed. Caitlin's eyes lit up. Then we don't stop them. We let them keep going. Raymond blinked. What? We let them think they're ahead. We give them something to take, she said. A slow plan formed behind her gaze. Something we control. Something traceable. Michael smiled faintly. Like bait. Raymond nodded slowly. We give them exactly what they want. He looked at Caitlin, this quiet girl with haunted eyes who had just saved him from a betrayal he hadn't seen coming. And when they reached for it, he said, voice steady, we'll be waiting. The next morning, everything looked normal. Too normal. Whitney hummed along to a jazz playlist as she sliced grapefruit in the kitchen, wearing a soft cream robe and her signature smile, the one that made strangers trust her instantly. Raymond walked in and watched her from the doorway, his expression unreadable. She turned and greeted him with a kiss on the cheek. You were up early, she said, brushing a curl behind her ear. Couldn't sleep again. Something like that, he replied. I just had some things on my mind, she laughed gently. You always do. He poured himself a coffee, this time from the pot he made himself. As he stirred, he noticed Caitlin sitting on the breakfast nook bench, head down, pretending to scroll through cartoons on her tablet. In reality, she was monitoring 3 signal interceptors wired into the house's electrical system overnight. Whitney didn't suspect a thing. Raymond sat across from Caitlin, watching Whitney move through the kitchen like nothing in the world could crack her calm. He wondered, not for the first time, how much of what she'd ever said to him had been real. She's here, Caitlin whispered through the tablet's Bluetooth mic, barely moving her lips. And so is the signal. 2 of them, one's pulsing, the other's active. They're listening now. Raymond nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. Good to know, he said aloud, looking toward Whitney. Later that afternoon, he called Bradley Scott to his office. Bradley was his CFO, co-founder, and friend of 20 years. They'd built Lewis Secure Tech together from nothing. If Raymond had a brother, it would have been Miles. And that's what made what Caitlin had told him feel like poison in his chest. He's been here when you weren't, she'd said. He and Whitney whispering, looking through your desk. Last week I heard him say, it has to match the launch date. Raymond didn't want to believe it. But after last night's discoveries, after uncovering 3 active listening devices, belief had little to do with it. Now he needed the truth. Bradley entered with his usual swagger black cashmere coat over a tailored grey suit, grinning like they hadn't spoken in weeks. You rang your partner. Have a seat, Raymond said calmly, gesturing toward the leather chair opposite his desk. Bradley dropped into it and crossed one ankle over his knee. What's the urgency? You sound tense. Just trying to get my ducks in a row, Raymond said. You know the prototype we're launching next week? The adaptive encryption layer. Bradley nodded slowly. Of course, it's the big one. I'm making some last-minute changes to the architecture. Raymond lied smoothly. Too many eyes on the current version. I'm setting up a decoy framework. Looks identical, but the data is non-functional. Bradley arched an eyebrow. You think someone's leaking information? Raymond studied him. I think it's always better to be careful. Miles's smile faltered just slightly. Well, let me know if you need me to do anything differently. I will, Raymond said. The moment Bradley left, Raymond locked the office door and turned to Caitlin, who had been watching everything on the discreet surveillance feed from the guest hallway closet. She looked up from her screen. He smiled too much. Raymond sighed. He always does. But this time, it felt off. Caitlin tapped her screen. He has a burner phone. I picked up a signal. It connected to the same frequency that Vay's bug used. Raymond felt his jaw tighten. You're sure? Caitlin looked at him squarely. I don't know. They spent the next 2 days building the trap. Raymond, with Caitlin and Margot's help, created a mirror folder of fake prototype files. The directory looked identical to the real one, even down to the metadata. The files were convincing, complex enough to pass a basic audit, but embedded with a tracer code that would silently notify them the moment someone attempted to access or transfer it. Michael, meanwhile, set up timestamp surveillance, voice-activated motion sensors near the home office and living room, plus a hidden lens inside the crystal vase. The irony wasn't lost on any of them turning Whitney's own tricks against her. That night, Caitlin sat quietly in her room, rechecking signals for the 5th time. Raymond stepped in, knocking softly on her half-open door. Are you still up? He asked. Caitlin nodded. I couldn't sleep. He walked in and sat at the edge of her bed. You shouldn't have to carry this much, he said. You're 9. I was 7 when I started noticing people lying, she said plainly. It's not that heavy anymore. Raymond looked at her for a long moment. You think she suspects anything? Caitlin shrugged. She's confident. Dangerous people usually are, but she's not careful anymore. She thinks you're distracted. And you were until now. He nodded slowly. Do you trust me? I trust facts, she said. But yeah, I think I trust you too. Oh, the next evening Whitney announced she was going to a late yoga class. I'll be back in about an hour, she said, brushing her lips against Raymond's cheek. Don't wait up. Raymond watched her leave. 37 minutes later, the guest room Wi-Fi pinged active. She's back, Caitlin said from the control room in the old wine cellar, now repurposed with monitors and signal interceptors. Not through the front door. She came in from the side patio entrance. She's opening the encrypted folder now. Raymond leaned forward. Is the tracer active? Already pinged? Caitlin said she's transmitting, and she just inserted a USB device. She's copying everything. Michael's voice came from behind. Time to call in the cavalry. Not yet, Raymond said. We need to see who gets it on the other end. 15 minutes passed. Whitney completed the transfer, removed the USB, and left the room. Another signal pinged. She'd sent it off to an overseas server. Caitlin followed the trail, fingers dancing across the keyboard. Server's masked, she muttered. But it's bouncing through Frankfurt, then Singapore. Whoever's receiving it is high on tears. Suddenly, Caitlin frowned. Wait, there's a reply coming back. What does it say? Raymond asked. Caitlin read aloud, eyes narrowing. Phase 2 confirmed. Final insertion tomorrow. Target destabilized. Raymond stiffened. Final insertion. Michael leaned closer. They think they've won. Or no, Raymond said, a steely calm settling into his voice. They're not even close. He looked at Caitlin. Tomorrow, he said, we let them think they've destroyed me. And then, Caitlin asked. Raymond's eyes darkened. Then we destroy them. The following morning began with eerie calm. Outside, birds chirped softly across the manicured lawns of the Lewis estate. Inside, the silence between Raymond and Whitney felt almost choreographed. She was back to her usual charm, wearing a navy blouse and pearl earrings as she poured coffee like nothing had happened. You have your big meeting today, right? She asked sweetly, glancing at him across the marble kitchen island. He smiled. It felt like wearing a mask. Yeah, just a quick overview with the legal team before the launch. Should I come by later? Bring dinner? That would be nice, he said with practiced warmth. I'll be back around 7. Caitlin, seated quietly at the table with her tablet, didn't look up, but Raymond caught the barely there twitch of her eyebrows. She knew Whitney was already planning her next move. By 9 a.m., Whitney was gone again to yoga. The moment her car exited the driveway, Raymond and Caitlin got to work. She sent another encrypted message. Caitlin reported from the basement monitoring room, but this one was different. Smaller packet like instructions. Raymond leaned over her shoulder. Can you open it? Not directly, but I can mirror it and cross-reference the ping path. Looks like it's going to someone local. How local? Silicon Valley local. Hillsborough. Raymond frowned. Only one person from my inner circle lives in Hillsborough. Miles, Caitlin said without hesitation. Raymond felt the pressure behind his eyes tighten. Bradley Scott, his friend, his business partner, his brother in every sense but blood. Caitlin looked up at him. We're going to need to catch them both in the act. He nodded. It's time for the bait. Later that day, Raymond called Bradley and Whitney to join him for dinner at the estate. Both of you, he said on the phone, careful to keep his voice steady. I have something important to share about the company. Whitney hesitated for half a beat. Of course, darling. Miles, when contacted separately, sounded surprised. Together? That's unusual. You'll see why, Raymond replied. Bring a bottle of that Pinot you like. As evening approached, the stage was set. Caitlin and Michael had worked with Raymond to wire the dining room and office with high-definition video and audio. Every entry point was monitored. Every device Whitney or Bradley might try to use had been replaced with replicas, leading to firewalled traps. At 6:58 p.m., Whitney arrived first, dressed elegantly in a grey-fitted dress. She greeted Raymond with a kiss that didn't linger. You seem tense, she said, brushing his lapel. Just big company nerves, he replied, leading her inside. Moments later, Bradley pulled up in his black Porsche, stepping out with his usual charisma, a bottle of wine in hand. Hope I'm not interrupting a romantic evening, he joked. Raymond grinned and clapped him on the shoulder. Not at all. Come on in. Dinner was served in the glass-walled atrium with the sun setting in amber streaks beyond the pines. Michael placed dishes with practiced gracer hands, steady, her eyes sharp. The conversation began light talks, sports, the weather. But underneath it all, every word was a layer in the trap. Tell us, Whitney said at last, crossing one leg over the other. What's this news? Raymond leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine. I've made a decision about the prototype. I've decided to fast-track its release and name the new encryption protocol after my father, the Edward cipher. Whitney blinked. You never mentioned that. I just decided, he said last night. Bradley looked vaguely uncomfortable. Well, that's quite the shift. Raymond smiled. I've been thinking a lot lately about legacy. Who I can trust. Who's actually standing with me. There was silence. Whitney's fingers tightened slightly around her wine glass. And that's why, Raymond continued, I've asked the FBI to audit the entire digital pathway of our prototype just to make sure everything's clean. Another pause. A long one? Whitney's voice was the first to break it. That seems dramatic. Is it? Raymond asked, eyes steady. Or is it just overdue? From the hallway, Caitlin monitored everything through the tablet in her lap. She caught the shift in Whitney's posture, the flicker in Miles's gaze, the subtle panic that neither of them spoke aloud. They're nervous, she said softly to Michael, who stood behind her. Good, Michael whispered. Let them stew. Back in the atrium, Whitney set down her glass. Raymond, I think we need to talk privately. Why? He asked. Something you don't want Bradley to hear? Bradley coughed into his fist. Maybe this isn't the time. Raymond turned cold. No, I think it is. In fact, I'd like to show you both something. He led them into the study. On the large screen, a video began to play. It showed Whitney earlier that week standing in the guest room uploading files. Then, another clip. Bradley at the office inserting a USB drive into Raymond's personal terminal. The footage was time-stamped, crystal clear. Vinus's face pallid. Bradley took a step back. Raymond turned to them. I trusted you, both of you. And you used my home, my systems, my life as your playground. Whitney's mask dropped. The smile dissolved. Her voice dropped an octave. You think you've got everything figured out? I think I've got enough, Raymond said. Behind them, the study doors opened. 2 agents entered plain clothes, badges already out. Whitney Myers, Bradley Scott, you're under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and violation of federal cybersecurity laws. Neither resisted. As the agents cuffed them, Caitlin entered silently and stood by Raymond's side. Whitney looked at her with something between fury and disbelief. It was you, she hissed. Caitlin stared at her, unflinching. You should have been more careful where you put your microphones. Whitney didn't speak again. As they were led out, Raymond felt the weight lift from his chest. Not joy, Just a release. A terrible relief. He turned to Caitlin. You saved me. She shook her head. You saved yourself. I just told the truth. He looked at her. Really? I looked at her. That's all it ever takes, isn't it? Someone to finally listen. That night, long after the doors closed and the house returned to silence, Raymond stood in the study and poured himself a glass of untouched juice. He didn't drink it. He just looked at it and smiled. The morning air was unusually crisp, as if the storm from the night before had swept away every trace of pretense in the Lewis estate. Raymond stood by the window of his study, his silhouette dark against the early sunlight breaking through the tall pines. In his hand was the same glass of untouched juice from the night before. He hadn't thrown it away. He couldn't. Not yet. Downstairs, the house had shifted back to a slower rhythm. No more Whitney's heels clicking on the hardwood floors. No more sly phone calls. No more carefully planned lies disguised as daily routine. In the kitchen, Caitlin quietly made breakfast with Michael. Eggs, toast, and hash browns, the kind Miss Thelma used to make for Caitlin on Sunday mornings in Detroit. She wanted to offer something grounding, something real. Michael placed a cup of black coffee on the table and looked over at the girl with warmth. You did something big last night, Caitlin. Caitlin didn't look up. She stirred the eggs slowly. I just told the truth. That takes more courage than you know. Caitlin finally looked up. Her eyes were tired but steady. Do you think he's angry at me? Michael paused, then shook her head. I think he sees you clearer now than ever. Upstairs. Raymond's phone rang. He answered it with a heavy breath. Mr. Lewis, this is Special Agent Laurie Daniel. Just following up. I'm listening. Whitney and Bradley are both in custody. We've begun searching Miles's properties. The digital evidence you provided, plus the footage, will fast-track the charges. But there's more. Raymond turned toward the desk. Go on. We found a financial trail, overseas accounts, a secondary shell company under your foundation's name. Your name? Tyrus felt his heart slow. They were using your reputation to funnel funds, Daniel continued, and Whitney had help beyond Miles. There's someone on your board, possibly more than one, signing off these transfers. We don't know who yet, but they tried to erase the trail. If not for your daughter, for Caitlin wouldn't have found it. Raymond lowered himself into the chair. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Keep me updated. I'll be ready. After the call ended, he sat in silence. The room felt too large, too quiet. He opened the drawer and pulled out an old photo that he hadn't touched in years. It was of him, younger, standing beside his late wife, Janelle, holding a toddler at the beach, his real daughter. Her name had been Aaron. He hadn't spoken that name in a long time. The ache in his chest returned with a quiet, familiar sting. Moments later, a gentle knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he said. Caitlin peeked her head through, her voice soft. Can I sit? He nodded. She stepped inside and crossed the room, carefully taking the seat opposite his desk. She wore a pale yellow hoodie and jeans too big for her. Her braids were tied up. Her eyes are a little unsure. Raymond looked at her for a long time before speaking. You never owed me anything, Caitlin. You understand that, right? She nodded. I know. And yet, you saved everything. I didn't want you to get hurt, she said. You were kind to me when you didn't have to be. That shouldn't be rare, he murmured. Silence passed between them. Then Caitlin leaned forward. There's something I need to tell you. Raymond's brows rose. Go ahead. She took a shaky breath. Whitney tried to give me money twice. She wanted me to keep quiet about something I saw on her laptop. I didn't take it. I just watched. Raymond nodded slowly. You saw the account transfer number. I saw a video of you sleeping. The footage was close, too close, like it was from inside your room. Raymond's hand tightened around the edge of the desk. She had a backup drive, Caitlin continued. It's in her car behind the license plate. I saw her hide it. Without a word, Raymond stood and reached for his keys. Wait, Caitlin said. Let me come with you. He hesitated, then nodded. They walked to the garage in silence. The air smelled faintly of pine oil and cold steel. Whitney's luxury SUV was still parked inside, untouched since her arrest. Raymond opened the driver's door, then knelt to examine the plate. A few twists of a screwdriver, and there it was, a small black flash drive taped behind the steel frame. He pulled it free, holding it up to the light. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "What if there's more?" Caitlin asked. "Then we burn it all down," Raymond said quietly. Together. Later that evening in the study, they plugged the drive into an isolated laptop with no network access. What they found made Caitlin gasp. Videos. Dozens of them. Not just of Raymond, but of board members, associates, government officials, each in moments of vulnerability, conversations, arguments, secrets. Whitney had been building a trove, not just for manipulation, for leverage. Caitlin looked away, sickened. Raymond closed the lid of the laptop slowly, his face unreadable. "She was preparing for war," he said. Ma's voice trembled. "And you were the weapon." He met her eyes. "Not anymore." In the days that followed, Raymond began a quiet, deliberate process. He resigned from 2 boards, fired 3 executives, and called private meetings with every major partner. Bit by bit, he rebuilt the walls of his world, but this time from stone instead of glass. Caitlin stayed by his side, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Raymond arranged for her schooling, assigned her a private tutor, and gave her the one thing she'd never had, a voice that mattered. One night, weeks later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Caitlin stood on the back patio with a blanket over her shoulders. Raymond joined her. "Cold?" he asked. "A little?" He handed her a mug of cocoa. She took it, then looked up at him. "Do you think people can change?" "I think people can choose," he replied. "That's the difference." She nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the porch lights. For the first time in years, Raymond felt peace, not because the storm was over, but because someone had helped him see it coming, and he'd chosen to stand in the rain. The rain had returned that night, not loud and furious like before, but steady, quiet, like a whisper against the windows of the Lewis estate. Raymond stood in the dining room, alone, a folder in his hands. Inside were names he once trusted, names tied to the very betrayal that almost consumed him. Michael entered carrying 2 mugs of chamomile tea. She noticed his silence. "It's late, Mr. Lewis." "I know." He turned the folder slightly in his hands. "I've been going through the list Caitlin helped piece together from the flash drive." Margot's brow furrowed. "And it's worse than I imagined," he said. "It wasn't just Whitney and Miles. 2 of my longest-serving advisors, Tony Griffin and Brianna Avery, have signed documents authorizing overseas disbursements through a dummy shell." Michael placed the mugs down and sat across from him. "I always felt Brianna was too polite to be real. She helped me set up the trust in 2003. I asked her to oversee the college scholarship fund. She used it to launder money." Margot's lips tightened. "So what now?" "I confronted them," he said. "One by one." Alone, he looked up. Not anymore. The next morning, the sun rose shrilly behind a curtain of silver clouds. Raymond pulled into the parking lot of Lewis Capital Group. The building stood tall, sterile, a glass empire he had built with his hands, now hiding the rot within its walls. Inside, the boardroom was already occupied when he arrived. 12 individuals sat waiting, murmuring, sipping coffee from their polished tumblers. Tony Griffin sat at the far end, his eyes shadowed with quiet calculation. Brianna Avery sat poised beside him, wearing her signature silk scarf and that same glassy smile. Raymond entered and placed a leather binder on the table without a word. The room fell into silence. "Thank you for coming," he began. "Today, I'm not here as your CEO. I'm here as the man you nearly destroyed." Brianna straightened slightly. "Raymond, what is this about?" He opened the binder and slowly slid 2 copies of signed authorizations down the table. Harvey's fingers twitched. "These are your signatures," Raymond said, his voice calm but steady. "Approving the rerouting of $48 million from our education fund to a shell in the Cayman Islands. The same account Bradley Devereux used to launder Whitney's cut." A few board members exchanged nervous glances. Harvey leaned back. "That's a serious accusation." "I'm not accusing," Raymond said, eyes locked on him. "I'm stating a fact." He pressed a button on a small device in his pocket. A speaker clicked to life, and Whitney's voice filled the room. "We'll use Brianna for the authorizations. She owes me. Harvey, too. They won't ask questions. Raymond is too distracted, chasing philanthropy and press interviews. The room went still. Raymond paused the audio. Effective immediately, he continued. You are both relieved of your positions. Legal counsel will follow up regarding criminal proceedings. Brianna opened her mouth, but Raymond raised a hand. Don't, he said. Not a single word. I trusted you. I defended you. His voice cracked slightly, but he didn't look away. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed the children we promised to help. The veterans we swore to honor the entire community that built this company with their faith. Security quietly entered and escorted both Brianna and Harvey out. Neither resisted. After the door shut, the room remained frozen. Raymond turned to the remaining members. Anyone else who's hiding something, this is your only chance. Come clean now. Nobody spoke. Raymond nodded. Then let's get back to work. But this time we build with honesty. That afternoon, as Raymond left the building, he saw Caitlin sitting outside near the fountain, reading a paperback copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She looked up as he approached. How'd it go? She asked. They're gone. She nodded once and closed the book. You did it. No, he said. We did. Ma stood, hesitating. Do you ever regret building all this? Raymond looked at the headquarters behind him, then at her number. I regret not watching closer. They walked in silence for a few moments. Then Caitlin said, I think we should do something. Like what? Take that education fund, the real one, and visit the schools it's supposed to help. See the kids, hear their stories. Raymond smiled. You're becoming a real troublemaker. You know that? She grinned. Guess I've had a good teacher. The next week, they traveled. Not in private jets or black limousines, but in a Scotted SUV, stopping at small schools in towns like Pineal Bluff, Arkansas, and Gallup, New Mexico. Places with cracked basketball courts and tiny libraries run by one person. Caitlin spoke to students, asked questions, listened closely, and Raymond, he watched quietly, deeply, as if learning the shape of the world all over again. One day, in a school in rural Mississippi, a boy named Andre looked at Raymond with wide eyes. Are you really the man on the news? The one with the glass tower in L.A.? Raymond crouched beside him. That's me. Andre leaned closer. You came all the way here? I came to see you. The boy looked down at his old, worn-out sneakers. Nobody ever does. Raymond glanced at Caitlin, who nodded. Well, he said, you're somebody, and this won't be the last time. Later, on the road back, Caitlin asked him, Do you think the world's changing? I think we're changing, he said, and sometimes that's enough to move the world a little. That night, back at the estate, Raymond received a call. It was Agent Daniel again. Mr. Lewis, we've identified the final piece. Someone else was feeding Whitney intel from inside your charity's advisory circle. Raymond's jaw tightened. Who? A pauser. Allison Palmer. She's not on payroll, but she chaired the health outreach program last year. Quiet woman, background in data analytics. Raymond's mind flashed. Allison, always helpful, always behind the scenes, rarely spoke, never questioned. We'll need your permission to run a deeper audit and possibly a quiet confrontation. Off record for now. Raymond looked out the window into the night. Caitlin was in the backyard, sitting under the big oak tree, head tilted to the stars. Yes, he said, but let's not corner her yet. He watched the girl he once called a stranger, and now couldn't imagine life without. Sometimes, he added quietly, truth shows up exactly when it's meant to. The next morning broke with golden sunlight filtering through the windows of the Lewis estate. The early light painted the floors in long, warm streaks, and birdsong trickled through the cracked kitchen window. Caitlin sat at the counter with a spoon halfway to her mouth, staring at the television news ticker. Her cereal was soggy, forgotten. Allison Palmer, she whispered. Raymond entered, adjusting the cuffs on his shirt. Still thinking about it. She was at the gala last year, Caitlin said. She gave me a cupcake. Pink frosting looked homemade. Raymond nodded. She worked the donor tables. Never caused trouble. Never asked for anything. She was kind, Caitlin said, then paused. That's what makes it worse, doesn't it? Raymond sighed and poured himself a cup of black coffee. Kindness makes the mask harder to see. Later that morning, Raymond sat across from Agent Daniel in a quiet corner of a cafe in Pasadena. The agent wore plain clothes and spoke without looking up from his coffee. She was careful, Daniel said. Encrypted channels. She only passed small pieces, projected earnings, construction dates, board travel schedules, and the surveillance in my office? Raymond asked. Daniel shook his head. That came from Whitney. Allison never planted anything herself, but she knew. Raymond leaned back. Why? Debt, divorce, medical bills for her sister. Whitney offered help. Allison believed it was harmless until it wasn't. Raymond rubbed his temples. Where is she now? She teaches coding classes on the weekends in Boyle Heights. Still lives in her old scuttle. We can pick her up any time. No, Raymond said. I want to speak to her first alone. That afternoon, Raymond and Caitlin drove to Boyle Heights. The neighborhood was buzzing with kids on bikes, parents hauling groceries, and street vendors under wide umbrellas. It smelled like grilled corn and city sweat. Allison Palmer stood at the door of a community center, helping an elderly man carry a laptop inside. She looked older than Raymond remembered. Her once dark hair now showed streaks of silver, and her eyes carried the weight of someone who hadn't slept well in years. When she saw Raymond, she froze. Mr. Lewis, Allison, he said calmly. May I have a word? They sat under a rusting patio umbrella in the rear courtyard. Caitlin stayed inside, speaking softly with the children. Allison folded her hands. I assume you know. I do. She swallowed hard. I didn't take any money. I didn't ask for favors, but you passed along information, he said, knowing what Whitney was. Allison stared down at her weathered fingers. It started with a question. Something about site inspection dates, then personnel shifts. I didn't even know what she was doing until much later, and when you knew, Allison's voice cracked. My sister Joan has Parkinson's. Medicaid wouldn't cover experimental treatment. Whitney knew someone. The treatment helped her hold a fork again. Raymond didn't speak for a long moment. You broke my trust, he finally said. But you didn't do it for a penthouse or a promotion. You did it for the family. She looked startled. I'm not excusing it, he said, but I understand it. Allison's voice was barely a whisper. What happens now? You step down from the foundation today and you go public. She blinked. Public? You tell the press what you did, why you did it, and what Whitney offered you. You name every person she corrupted. You tell the truth so no one else like her gets another foothold. Allison nodded slowly, tears welling. And if I refuse, Raymond's expression hardens, then I hand your name to federal prosecutors. Allison stood. I'll speak. As they walked back inside, Caitlin met them with 2 paper cups of lemonade. Allison took one, her hand trembling. You're Caitlin, aren't you? Yes, ma'am. Allison gave her a long look. You've got courage. Caitlin smiled, but her eyes were serious. Sometimes truth just needs a voice. That evening, the press conference took place in a modest auditorium. No flashing lights, no designer gowns, just rows of curious reporters and a podium with the Lewis Foundation's seal behind it. Allison stood at the microphone. She wore no makeup. Her blouse was plain, her hands shaking. I betrayed a man who trusted me, she began, her voice quivering. I didn't do it for greed, but for desperation, and still, it was wrong. She detailed Whitney's manipulation, the quiet questions, the promises of help, and the guilt that followed. When she finished, there was silence. Then a single clap. It came from Caitlin, standing in the back, hands steady. Slowly, others joined in. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Raymond stood beside Caitlin. You didn't have to clap, he said. She didn't have to tell the truth either, Caitlin replied. They drove home with the windows down, the warm California air weaving through the car. Caitlin hummed softly to a Sam Cooke song on the radio. Raymond glanced over. You really believe people can change? I believe people can choose, she said. That's what matters. Later that night, Raymond stood at the fireplace staring at an old photo him, Whitney, and Bradley at a charity gala. He took a breath and dropped it into the flames. It curled, blackened, and vanished. Caitlin walked in with a new folder. What's this? He asked. Proposals for the Truth and Transparency Initiative. You said you wanted to rebuild. I figured we'd start with that. Raymond opened it. Inside were ideas for community reporting, internal oversight teams, youth boards, and, at the bottom, a note scribbled in Caitlin's handwriting. Justice isn't about revenge. It's about making sure no one else gets hurt. He looked at her, then back at the folder. Looks like I've got some homework. Caitlin grinned. Good thing you know a straight-A student. Outside, the night deepened, but for the first time in weeks, the darkness didn't feel so heavy. 3 days after Allison's confession shook the public, the story refused to die. Cable news shows debated it endlessly. Oprah's praised Raymond Lewis's restraint, and Caitlin Brooks' strange but powerful role in the unraveling. But inside the Lewis estate, things were far from calm. Raymond sat alone in his study, staring at a stack of sealed envelopes. They were from board members, executives, and politicians. Some offering support, others quietly backing away, but one envelope caught his eye. It bore no return address, and no seal. Inside was a photograph. Whitney. She stood beside an unfamiliar man in a dark suit. They were shaking hands in front of a small private airfield. Scrolled across the back of the photo in red pen was a message. She's not done, and she's not alone. Raymond stood slowly, heart pounding. He crossed the room and picked up the landline. Get me Daniel. Now, minutes later, Daniel's voice came through the receiver low and clear. We were afraid of this. Who's the man in the photo? Name's Thompson, private contractor, former NSA. He vanished from official records 5 years ago, and now he's working with Whitney. It looks like it. And if Thompson's involved, she's moving beyond corporate espionage. This could be federal. Raymond's jaw clenched. I want security doubled around Caitlin. She's too close now. Meanwhile, Caitlin was at the local library, leafing through stacks of printed pages and old case files. She sat at a table beneath a flickering fluorescent light, highlighting names, dates, and notes she had copied from the digital archive. Next to her was a printed list of foundation donors from the past 5 years. She had circled 3 names. One of them, she couldn't shake Kyle Richards. Kyle had attended every annual fundraiser, donated heavily to youth programs, and was once photographed with Whitney at a retreat in Aspen. A quick background check showed he also owned multiple shell companies tied to offshore accounts. Caitlin, a voice called gently. It was Mrs. Enwin, the librarian. Closing time in 10 minutes, sweetie. Thank you, ma'am, Caitlin said, gathering her notes. She stepped into the night air. The library parking lot was nearly empty. Her breath caught when she spotted a dark SUV across the street. It wasn't parked illegally, but something about the way it just sat there, engine off, made her spine tighten. She took a deep breath, pulled out her phone, and dialed Raymond. Stay on the line, he said immediately. Get somewhere public now. Caitlin walked briskly to a gas station 2 blocks away, stepping inside and pretending to browse snacks. Back at the estate, Raymond slammed the phone down and barked orders at the head of his security team. I want eyes on her. She's not to be alone. Note for a second. Later that night, back in the safety of the estate, Ma spread out her notes on the dining table. Lewis stood beside her, reading the connections she had mapped. It was a web donor, shell companies, politicians, all tangled around one name. Whitney Blake. This goes deeper than the foundation, Caitlin whispered. She's been building something. Raymond nodded grimly. Something that hides in plain sight. The following morning, Raymond and Caitlin met with Daniel in a secure underground facility near Culver City. The room was bare except for a round table, a whiteboard, and a projector. Daniel clicked a remote, and a series of photos and files appeared. Thompson was spotted boarding a private jet out of Venice Airport 2 days ago. No flight plan filed. Likely destination, Grand Junction, Colorado. There's a facility out there. Looks like a data server farm. Owned by one of Kyle Richards' companies. Caitlin frowned. What's in the server farm? Jensen hesitated. If we're right, blackmail, audio, video, documents, every corrupt deal Whitney's touched, every powerful figure she's compromised. She doesn't just want revenge, Ish wants leverage. Raymond's voice was steel. Then we go get it. Careful, Daniel warned. This isn't a boardroom anymore. You're stepping into her game now. Later that day, while Raymond and the agent prepared logistics for a legal probe, Caitlin stayed behind at the estate. She walked the halls with a feeling she couldn't shake. Something in the West Wing, Whitney's old study, kept drawing her in. She pushed open the tall oak door. Dust floated in sunbeams. The room was perfectly preserved. A vanity with framed photos, antique books on the shelves, and a heavy armwire against the far wall. Caitlin's fingers brushed the shelves as she walked. One of the books, a leather-bound volume on art restoration, didn't sit flush. She pulled it. A faint click echoed, and the armwire creaked open, not outward, but backward, revealing a narrow corridor behind it. Caitlin stepped back, startled. Then she turned on her phone's flashlight and stepped inside. The passage was narrow, the walls made of old brick and wood. At the end was a small locked cabinet. Inside, beneath a false bottom, she found what looked like a portable hard drive and a thin folder labeled simply for insurance. She brought it straight to Raymond. They laid the contents on the desk. USB drives, photographs, and a handwritten letter in Whitney's perfect cursive. The note read, "If you're reading this, I'm already gone. But I never played without a backup plan. And you, Raymond, were always predictable. So I left you a piece just enough to remind you who you underestimated." The drive contained surveillance footage, boardroom recordings, tapped phone calls, and one clip that made Raymond go pale. A video of Whitney sitting in his office 6 months ago, speaking directly to someone off camera. "She's smart, that girl," Whitney said. "But kids always think justice is clean. It never is. That's what makes them dangerous." Caitlin watched Raymond's face. "She was planning this even before I came. She always knew how to read a threat," he said. And now they both knew Whitney hadn't just betrayed them. She'd built a trap, and Caitlin had just found the key to unlocking it. The sky above Los Angeles darkened early that evening, as if the city itself sensed the storm about to break. Inside Raymond Lewis's private jet, Caitlin sat quietly buckled beside him. The hum of the engines, a low, steady drum, beat beneath her thoughts. She clutched her notebook tightly, its pages worn from hours of scribbled connections, clues, names, timelines, everything that had led to this moment. Raymond looked over at her. Nervous, she hesitated, more like ready. Their destination, Grand Junction, Colorado. According to Daniel's intel, the server farm there housed the final pieces of Whitney's Weber digital vault of blackmail materials that could ruin half the city's elite, if leaked. It was also the only thing keeping her in control. "She won't give it up easily," Raymond said. "And if Thompson's still protecting it—" "I know," Caitlin said, her voice steady. "That's why we brought the truth." Upon landing, a black SUV met them at the tarmac. Daniel and a small team of federal agents were already on the ground, hidden in position. The server farm was a nondescript concrete compound nestled between two storage facilities, quiet, cold, and heavily surveilled. From the outside, it looked like any other data warehouse. But underground, it hid secrets built to outlast the careers and reputations of powerful people. Inside the command van, Daniel laid out the plan. "We go silent. You two come with me. We get to the central node, extract the drives, and upload what we need to the secured FBI channel. If she shows up, she will," Caitlin said. They moved swiftly in black coats and muffled steps. They entered through the side loading dock. The interior was stark with rows of humming servers glowing in the dim artificial light. Security guards lay unconscious in a back hall and lethal darts, Daniel clarified. At the heart of the complex was a small locked room marked authorized personnel only. Raymond entered the passcode he'd found in Whitney's personal files. The door slid open. There she was. Whitney stood in the center of the room, her arms crossed, eyes calm. Her tailored gray suit was immaculate. The sight of Caitlin made her lips twitch into a slow, icy smile. "I was wondering when the child would show up," she said. "Did you really think you could undo me with sentiment?" Raymond stepped in beside Caitlin. "You underestimated her just like you underestimated loyalty." Whitney glanced at him, bored. "Loyalty? Don't flatter yourself. Everything you built, your empire, your foundation, your legacy, it was made of masks and mirrors. You just didn't want to look behind the curtain." Daniel signaled quietly, his agents taking position around the room. "I've already backed up the entire server farm," Whitney continued. Even if you take this place apart, bite by bite, there's a copy waiting overseas. You can't stop the release." "You're right," Caitlin said, stepping forward. "We can't stop the data, but we can control the narrative." Whitney raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Caitlin pulled out the drive she had found hidden behind the false cabinet back at the estate. She handed it to Daniel. "Your insurance drive? The one you thought would protect you? It's going live in 10 minutes. Everything, including the video of you threatening Raymond, the embezzlement records, the fake donor accounts. You didn't just keep dirt on others. You kept dirt on yourself." Whitney's face paled just slightly. "You see," Caitlin said, voice rising, "people like you think power is about holding things over others. But real power, it's about owning the truth before it owns you. And we're done being silent." Suddenly, the floor vibrated. A backup generator kicked in. Daniel's calm crackled. "We've got movement on the east side. Someone's trying to override the lock." Whitney smiled again. "I told you I'm not alone." Before she could speak again, 2 agents tackled her to the floor, securing her wrists with reinforced cuffs. Daniel pulled Caitlin aside. "We need to move now." Lewis stayed just long enough to watch Whitney escorted out, her heels clicking against the cold tile. Her expression never broke, but her silence spoke volumes. Back in the command van, Caitlin plugged in the drive and watched the secure upload bar crawl forward. "It's done," Daniel confirmed. "She's finished. We'll get the rest from here." Raymond placed a gentle hand on Caitlin's shoulder. "You were incredible." She exhaled slowly. "She almost won, but she didn't." He said, "Because of you." They flew back to Los Angeles under cover of darkness. By morning, headlines exploded across the country. Whistleblower teen exposes billion-dollar blackmail ring. CEO's fiancée arrested in espionage scheme. Justice unfolds at Lewis Foundation. At the next board meeting, Raymond addressed his executives with clear eyes and a grounded tone. From this day forward, the Lewis Foundation is no longer a tool for power games. We're going back to our roots, helping children, rebuilding communities, funding honest futures, and we owe that to one brave girl who saw what others wouldn't. He turned to Caitlin, seated proudly beside him, now dressed in a neat grey blazer and jeans. Her eyes glistened. The room erupted in applause. Later that week, Caitlin and Raymond stood at the edge of the community garden they had helped reopen in south-central LA. Kids played nearby, the sun warm overhead. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "I still hear her voice sometimes, like an echo, but it's fading. She'll stay in jail a long time." "Good, not just for what she did to you, but for what she almost made me believe that we're too small to matter." Raymond looked at her, eyes proud. "You matter more than you know." Caitlin reached down and picked a small daisy growing along the garden path. She tucked it into her notebook. "For the record," she said quietly, "justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's just a whisper that someone finally listened to, and in that quiet space between the weight of truth and the freedom of speaking it, the story closed with the kind of peace that only comes after the storm." If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done?